The chandeliers cast 1,000 tiny diamonds of light across Bexley Hall as Vriya Tannifirth surveyed the annual Quantum Ventures charity ball. A magnificent ice swan, carved to resemble the company's hummingbird logo, was slowly melting into a puddle beneath a tower of champagne flutes. Droplets slid from its beak into vintage crystal worth more than her first car. That's when she knew the evening would be a performance of wealth masquerading as philanthropy, exactly the kind of spectacle that would make CEO Elisandre Dorovan clap with manufactured delight while the company's quarterly numbers bled red. Behind closed doors. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Vriya adjusted her emerald gown, purchased specifically for tonight's event and already destined for return tomorrow, and straightened her shoulders. The familiar ache of tension nestled between her shoulder blades as she scanned the room for familiar faces. 7 years as Chief Innovation Officer at Quantum Ventures had taught her to navigate these waters with the precision of a shark circling prey, even when she felt more like the bait. The ballroom of Bexley Hall, Orviston City's most prestigious venue, hummed with the practiced laughter of tech moguls and investment bankers. Tables draped in silver and sapphire linens formed concentric circles around a central stage where, later, the charity auction would commence. Each table bore a small holographic display announcing its occupant's donation tier. Vriya's table, positioned near the front, glowed with the words, Platinum Innovators, $250,000, in shimmering blue light. She made her way through clusters of conversations that paused briefly as she passed, just long enough for eyes to assess her value to their networking goals before resuming. Her smile remained fixed, a perfect calibration of warmth and professionalism that never reached her eyes. Tonight wasn't about enjoyment, it was about representation. Elisandre had messaged an hour ago claiming a strategic investor dinner would delay her arrival, leaving Vriya to play ambassador for the company's supposed commitment to empowering future technologists. As she approached her assigned table, she noticed Theo Maldivar already seated, his attention focused on the small projection emanating from his custom wristband. The sight of Quantum Ventures' largest competitor sent a jolt through her system. Miss Tannifirth, he said without looking up, his voice carrying the relaxed confidence of someone who never needed to demand attention to receive it. I was beginning to think I'd been abandoned to fend for myself among the donation-hungry. Theo was a legend in the quantum computing world, not just for founding Maldivar Mechanics at 23, but for transforming it into the industry's most ethical powerhouse within a decade. At 42, his reputation for ruthless brilliance was matched only by his reputation for never compromising on principle. His silver-streaked black hair was cut with mathematical precision, and his suit, a deep navy that bordered on black, looked tailored by someone who understood both physics and fashion. Mr. Maldivar, Vriya replied, taking her seat with deliberate grace. I wasn't aware you'd be at our table this evening. Last-minute arrangements, he said, finally looking up. His eyes, deep-set and calculating, studied her with uncomfortable directness. Something about maximizing donor potential through strategic seating charts. Vriya nodded, reaching for her water glass to occupy her hands. The true charitable act of these events, forcing competitors to make small talk over overpriced entrees. The corner of his mouth twitched. Speaking of competition, I read your paper on quantum neural networks last month. Revolutionary approach to the entanglement problem. Vriya nearly choked on her water. Her research had been published under Quantum Ventures' corporate banner with Elisandre listed as project lead, despite Vriya having done the theoretical work entirely herself. Thank you, she said carefully. Though I'm surprised you'd attribute that to me rather than my CEO. I make it my business to know who's actually doing the work, Theo replied, his gaze never wavering. Elisandre Dorovan has many talents, but theoretical quantum physics isn't one of them. Before Vriya could respond, their table began filling with other guests, a venture capitalist whose firm had recently invested in 3 failed startups, a tech journalist known for puff pieces that read like advertisements, and a social media influencer whose connection to technology extended only as far as posting about it. Vriya shifted into autopilot, topping up wine glasses, nodding at appropriate intervals during mundane anecdotes about vacation homes, and deflecting questions about Quantum Ventures' rumored financial troubles with practiced ease. The latest projection models look promising, she said when cornered by the journalist. We're expecting a significant upturn by Q3. The lie slid from her lips with practiced ease, the same line she'd been instructed to repeat for months while internally, departments were quietly being dismantled. 2 hours in, with still no sign of Elisandre, Vriya excused herself to check her messages. In the relative quiet of the hallway, she pulled up her secure work channel. Nothing from her CEO, but several urgent notifications from the finance department that had come through during dinner. She opened them, scanning quickly through the data. The blood drained from her face. The Series D funding they'd been counting on had fallen through. Worse, the potential acquisition deal with Nexicorp, their last hope for salvation, had collapsed that afternoon. Quantum Ventures was now officially 90 days from insolvency unless immediate action was taken. Vriya leaned against the wall, mind racing. She'd warned Elisandre 6 months ago about their unsustainable burn rate, about the fundamental flaws in their market approach. She'd proposed a complete restructuring of their product line, a pivot to specialized applications rather than consumer-facing interfaces. Elisandre had smiled that perfect, porcelain smile of hers and said, "That's why I keep you around, Vri, to worry about the details while I focus on the big picture." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The details. As if potential bankruptcy was a mere footnote. Vriya composed herself and returned to the table just as the string quartet transitioned into a contemporary piece that probably cost thousands in licensing fees alone. Theo Maldivar was engaged in what appeared to be a fascinating conversation with the venture capitalist, but his eyes flicked to her as she sat down, noting the tension in her shoulders with unsettling perception. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly as the others at their table became distracted by the arrival of dessert, an architectural marvel of chocolate and gold leaf that seemed designed for photographs rather than consumption. "Perfectly fine," Vriya replied, the lie automatic. "Just checking if our CEO is en route." Theo studied her for a moment longer than was comfortable. "Interesting," he said finally. "Your quantum research shows a remarkable talent for finding paths through chaos. I wonder if you apply that same talent to corporate navigation." Before she could decipher his meaning, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. Elisandre had finally arrived, resplendent in a white gown that seemed designed to reflect every available light source. Her platinum blonde hair was arranged in an elaborate updo that must have required hours, and her entrance was carefully timed to coincide with the end of the current musical piece. "She always did have a flair for the theatrical," Theo murmured, his tone carrying a hint of something darker than mere observation. Elisandre made her way through the room like royalty granting audiences, stopping at strategic tables, her laugh tinkling like expensive crystal at precisely calibrated intervals. She didn't approach their table, instead taking a seat at one reserved for the evening's highest donors, those who had contributed over $1 million to the charity. The message was clear: even at her own company-sponsored event, Elisandre placed herself above her team. The charity director took the stage, a woman whose vocal enthusiasm for empowering the next generation seemed inversely proportional to her understanding of actual technology. Vriya applauded at appropriate moments, her mind still processing the financial reports. If the company collapsed, her research would be sold off in pieces to the highest bidder, her team scattered to competitors who might not understand the work's significance. 7 years. 7 years of 16-hour days, of cancelled vacations and missed family gatherings. 7 years of watching Elisandre take credit for innovations Vriya had spearheaded, of swallowing her pride when investors directed their questions to the glamorous CEO rather than the woman who actually knew the answers. Her phone vibrated in her clutch. A message from Elisandre: "Need to speak with you." Corner bar after speeches. Important. Vriya's stomach tightened. In Elisandre's vocabulary, important usually meant either taking credit for a success or assigning blame for a failure. Given today's financial news, Vriya could guess which this would be. The speeches dragged on, each one more self-congratulatory than the last. Tech titans patting themselves on the back for donating amounts that represented less than a rounding error on their annual bonuses. Vriya maintained her professional smile, even as she felt Theo's occasional glance, as if he were reading something in her expression that she thought she was concealing. When the formal program concluded and the auction was announced, Vriya excused herself and made her way to the corner bar as instructed. Elisandre was already there, champagne flute in hand, engaged in animated conversation with the CEO of Nexicorp, the very company that had supposedly walked away from their acquisition deal hours earlier. "Vriya. There you are," Elisandre called, her voice carrying that artificial warmth she reserved for public settings. "Join us. We were just discussing the future of quantum interface technology." Vriya approached, nodding a greeting to Darius Fleming, Nexicorp's notoriously cutthroat CEO. He returned the acknowledgement with the barest tilt of his head. "I was just telling Darius about our latest breakthrough," Elisandre continued. "The neural network algorithms you've been tinkering with. As if 3 years of groundbreaking research could be reduced to a hobby." "Mr. Fleming," Vriya said evenly, I understood your company had decided against pursuing further discussions with Quantum Ventures. Fleming's eyebrows rose slightly. At her directness. Officially, perhaps, he replied. Unofficially, Elisandre and I have been exploring more creative arrangements. Creative arrangements that apparently don't involve the company's chief innovation officer, Vriya observed, keeping her tone light despite the betrayal burning in her chest. Elisandre's perfect smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Why don't we step aside for a moment, Vri? There are some developments we should discuss. She led Vriya to a quiet alcove near the service entrance, far enough from the crowd to ensure privacy. The moment they were alone, Elisandre's warmth evaporated like morning dew under a harsh sun. The board met this afternoon, she said without preamble. We've decided to pursue a strategic restructuring. Vriya recognized the corporate euphemism immediately. You're cutting departments. We're streamlining operations to maximize investor appeal, Elisandre corrected, her smile never wavering. Nexacorp is still interested, but on different terms. They want the quantum neural network patents and the core research team. My patents. My team. The company's assets, Elisandre countered smoothly. And to make the deal work, we need to demonstrate fiscal responsibility. Vriya felt the conversation's direction like a cold wind. And how exactly are you demonstrating this responsibility? By eliminating redundancies at the executive level. Elisandre's voice was almost gentle, as if she were delivering good news. Your position is being absorbed into R&D general operations. Darius specifically requested that we maintain the research continuity, but with a more pliable leadership structure. The meaning was clear. Nexacorp wanted Vriya's work without Vriya's influence, or her equity stake in the company. You're firing me, Vriya stated flatly. I prefer to think of it as freeing you to explore new opportunities, Elisandre replied, her smile widening. To show perfect teeth. Your severance package will be generous, of course. 2 months' salary, accelerated vesting on your existing options. My options that will be worthless when you sell to Nexacorp at a discount, Vriya noted, surprising herself with how calm she sounded despite the earthquake occurring beneath her professional foundation. Elisandre's expression hardened slightly. The terms of the deal are confidential. As is the fact that you're selling proprietary technology that you personally don't fully understand to a competitor known for stripping companies for parts. Vriya held her ground, even as her mind raced through implications. Does the board know you're negotiating directly with Fleming? A flash of something, fear, perhaps, crossed Elisandre's face before her mask of confidence returned. The board authorized me to pursue all avenues to ensure company survival. This is business, Vriya. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. 7 years of her life, her research, her innovations, reduced to an impersonal business decision delivered. With a smile at a charity event. When? Vriya asked simply. Effective immediately. HR will contact you Monday about collecting your things. Elisandre glanced toward the main ballroom, where the auction was now in full swing. I'd appreciate if you discreetly make your exit now. Better for everyone if we avoid any awkwardness. Vriya stood perfectly still, her mind spinning through options, consequences, next steps. One thought rose above the others, clear and sharp, Clause 27. 3. The liquidation trigger. When Quantum Ventures had restructured 3 years ago, Vriya had insisted on a specific clause in her executive contract, one that Elisandre had dismissed as legal paranoia and approved without much thought. The clause stated that if Vriya was terminated without cause while the company was in financial distress, defined as less than 120 days from insolvency, her options would convert to preferred shares with specific liquidation rights. Rights that would place her ahead of common shareholders, including Elisandre, in any acquisition scenario. Rights that would give her effective veto power over any deal that didn't fairly value the intellectual property she'd developed. Rights that Elisandre had clearly forgotten about in her rush to salvage a personal golden parachute from the company's descent. I understand, Vriya said finally, her voice steady. I wouldn't want to create awkwardness. Relief flooded Elisandre's features. I knew you'd be reasonable. That's always been your strength, Vri, seeing the logical path forward. Logic has always been my guide, Vriya agreed, allowing a small smile. Will you be announcing the Nexacorp negotiations tonight? Not officially. We're keeping things quiet until the paperwork is finalized next week. Elisandre glanced at her watch, a limited edition timepiece that cost more than many of her employees' annual salaries. I should get back. The tech press is expecting some face time. Of course. Don't let me keep you from your adoring public. Elisandre gave her arm a patronizing squeeze. This really is for the best, you know. You're too brilliant to be tied to one company forever. Think of it as liberation. With that final twist of the knife, she glided back toward the ballroom, leaving Vriya alone in the alcove, 7 years of loyalty discarded with a smile and an empty platitude. Vriya didn't move immediately. Her mind had shifted into the same analytical state she entered when solving complex quantum equations, detached, precise, seeing multiple potential outcomes simultaneously. She had 72 hours before the markets opened on Monday. 72 hours before Elisandre could formalize the Nexicorp deal. 72 hours to activate Clause 27. 3 and bring the entire house of cards crashing down. She gathered her clutch, straightened her spine, and walked not toward the exit as instructed, but back into the ballroom. The auction was in full swing. Paddles rising and falling like strange birds as tech elite competed to outspend each other for charity bragging rights. As she passed her original table, Theo Maldivar caught her eye. Something in her expression must have communicated the seismic shift that had just occurred, because he immediately excused himself and intercepted her path. "You look like someone who just received interesting news," he observed, falling into step beside her. "Interesting is one word for it," Vriya replied, continuing her purposeful stride toward the coat check. "Devastating might be another. Or perhaps liberating." "Those aren't typically synonyms," Theo noted, his voice lowered as they navigated the perimeter of the room. "Though I've found that professional devastation often precedes the most significant liberation." Vriya paused, turning to face him directly. "Is that experience speaking, Mr. Maldivar?" "Theo, please." His expression was unreadable. "And yes. Before founding Maldivar Mechanics, I was unceremoniously expelled from Hypatia Systems for suggesting their approach to quantum encryption was fundamentally flawed." "History proved you right." "History usually does, for those patient enough to wait for it." He studied her with renewed interest. "But you don't strike me as someone inclined to wait for vindication." Vriya felt a strange calm settling over her. "I've always preferred to accelerate inevitable outcomes rather than pretending they won't arrive." "An admirable philosophy." Theo reached into his jacket and produced a sleek business card, matte black with silver lettering that seemed to shift under the light. "If you find yourself with unexpected availability in the coming days, I'd be interested in discussing quantum neural networks with someone who actually understands them." Vriya accepted the card, its weight suggesting it was made from some exotic metal rather than paper. "Are you offering me a job, Mr. Maldivar?" "I'm offering you a conversation," he corrected. "Jobs are what people like Elisandre Dorovan give to keep talent leashed. I prefer partnerships with those who've proven they won't be collared." Before she could respond, a commotion arose near the stage. Elisandre had taken the microphone, her voice carrying through the room with practiced projection. "Ladies and gentlemen, while we continue our wonderful auction, I wanted to take a moment to share some exciting news about Quantum Ventures' future." Vriya tensed. Elisandre was moving faster than anticipated, already setting the public narrative. "It seems your former CEO is eager to control the story," Theo observed quietly. "Former," Vriya repeated, the word strange on her tongue despite its technical accuracy. "The timing of your exit and her announcement suggests causation rather than correlation," he continued. "Particularly given Nexicorp's presence tonight." Vriya's eyes narrowed. "You're remarkably well informed for someone who's supposedly a competitor." "In quantum terms, everything is entangled," Theo replied with the ghost of a smile. "Information behaves similarly in our industry." On stage, Elisandre was painting a rosy picture of strategic partnerships and next-generation innovation. Pathways, carefully crafted non-statements that the assembled press would dutifully report as significant developments. "She's laying groundwork," Vriya murmured. "Setting expectations for the Nexicorp announcement next week." "And your response?" Theo asked, his attention fully on Vriya rather than the spectacle unfolding on stage. Vriya tucked his card into her clutch, decision crystallizing like code resolving into an elegant solution. "My response requires access to systems I won't have come Monday morning." "Need a ride?" he offered, nodding toward the exit. For the first time that evening, Vriya's smile reached her eyes. "I believe I do." As they moved toward the exit, Vriya caught a glimpse of Elisandre on stage, radiant in her white gown, basking in attention while setting the stage for a deal that would sacrifice years of innovation for a quick cash infusion. Their eyes met briefly across the room, Elisandre's widening slightly in surprise at seeing Vriya still present, and with Theo Maldivar of all people. Vriya didn't look away. She held Elisandre's gaze for 3 full seconds, just long enough for uncertainty to flicker across her perfect features, before turning and walking out with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what chain reaction she was about to trigger. Outside, the night air carried the first hint of autumn crispness. Thero's autonomous vehicle, a sleek, midnight blue marvel of engineering, waited at the curb. "Where to?" he asked as the doors slid open silently. "Quantum Ventures headquarters." Vriya replied without hesitation. "I have 72 hours and a liquidation clause to activate." Thero's vehicle glided through Orveston City's gleaming towers in silent efficiency, the interior cabin bathed in subtle blue light that made the night outside seem even darker. Vriya sat with perfect posture despite the earthquake happening. Beneath her professional life, fingers moving rapidly across her personal tablet as she initiated remote access to Quantum Ventures' secure systems. "I take it you're not simply collecting family photos from your work drive," Thero observed, his attention divided between her determined expression and the nightscape beyond the windows. "I'm accessing what's legally mine while I still can," Vriya replied without looking up. "Elisandre will lock me out of everything by morning, standard protocol for executive terminations, but she won't expect me to move this quickly." The quantum encryption protecting Quantum Ventures servers was formidable. Vriya had designed much of it herself, but she'd also built in authentication pathways that recognized her unique access patterns. Not backdoors, exactly, but personalized. Security protocols that responded to her specific command sequences, like a lock recognizing not just a key but the precise way its owner turned it. "There," she murmured as the final firewall yielded. "I'm in." The vehicle slowed as they approached the Quantum Ventures headquarters, a 40-story monument of glass and brushed titanium that dominated the city's technology corridor. Even at this late hour, lights still burned in scattered offices, the dedicated, or desperate, still working while executives sipped champagne at charity galas. "Your security team works weekends?" Thero asked as they pulled into the private executive parking area, noting the uniformed guards at the entrance. 24/7, Vriya confirmed. "But they know me." Indeed, as she stepped from the vehicle, the senior guard straightened and offered a respectful nod. "Evening, Ms. Tannifirth. Didn't expect to see you tonight. Thought you'd be at the charity thing." "Left early," she replied easily. "Need to prepare for a meeting Monday." A meeting that would never happen, but he didn't need to know that. "Of course. Want me to notify anyone you're here?" "No need to disturb anyone's weekend," Vriya said with a warm smile that concealed the storm brewing behind her eyes. "I won't be long." The guard waved them through, Thero following a half-step behind. "Impressive," he murmured once they were in the private executive elevator. "The guard didn't even question my presence." "When you move with confidence, people rarely question you," Vriya replied as she pressed her palm to the biometric scanner. "A lesson Elisandre taught me, ironically. Enough." The elevator rose smoothly to the 38th floor, executive row, where Vriya's office occupied the northeast corner with its panoramic views of the city and mountains beyond. The space was meticulously organized, walls lined with engineering awards and framed patents, a standing desk positioned to capture both the sunrise and the sprawling research campus below. 7 years in this room," Vriya said quietly as she activated her workstation. "I've spent more time here than in my own apartment." Thero moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the technological kingdom spread below. "It's an impressive operation," he acknowledged. "Though I always wondered why Quantum focused so heavily on consumer applications when your fundamental research had more transformative potential in specialized fields." "Because consumer tech makes for better press conferences," Vriya replied, fingers flying across her keyboard. Elisandre could never resist a splashy product launch, even when the market wasn't ready. On her screens, complex data structures unfurled like digital origami, project files, research notes, financial projections, and buried deep within the corporate architecture, the legal documents she sought. Vriya navigated the system with the familiarity of someone who had helped build it, each keystroke purposeful, each command precise. "There it is," she breathed as she located her executive employment contract. Clause 27. 3. The liquidation trigger. Thero moved closer, eyes scanning the dense legal text. "Fascinating. You anticipated this scenario?" "Not specifically," Vriya admitted. "But I learned early that Elisandre values loyalty only when it's convenient. This was my insurance policy." The clause was elegantly simple in its devastating potential. In the event of termination without cause during a period of financial distress, defined as less than 120 days from insolvency based on current burn rate and available capital, all invested options would immediately convert to Series A preferred shares with 3x liquidation preference and veto rights over any asset sale exceeding 30% of company value. "You own 4% of the company," Thero noted, quickly grasping the implications. "Which would convert to effective control over any major transaction," Vriya finished. "Including the Nexicorp deal Elisandre is so desperate to close." "And The company is officially in distress? Vriya pulled up the latest financial reports, the ones that had appeared on her phone during dinner. 90 days from insolvency as of today's date. The trigger conditions are met. She downloaded copies of everything to her personal secure storage, financial statements, her contract, evidence of the company's distress, and most importantly, the quantum neural network research that represented her life's work. Not to steal it, the intellectual property legally belonged to Quantum Ventures, but to preserve it against whatever desperate measures Elisandre might take in the coming days. What's your next move? Theo asked, his tone suggesting genuine curiosity rather than judgment. Vriya paused, fingers hovering above her keyboard. What was her next move? Vengeance burned hot in her chest, the desire to watch Elisandre's carefully constructed house of cards collapse, to see the board members who had rubber-stamped her dismissal scramble to explain themselves to shareholders. But beneath the anger lay something deeper, the determination to protect her work, her team, and the potential of technology she believed could genuinely change the world. First, I notify legal that I'm invoking Clause 27. 3, she said, decision crystallizing. Then I contact the 3 board members who've always been skeptical of Elisandre's leadership. Then, she turned to face Theo directly. Then I consider your offer of a conversation. Theo's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes suggested approval. A measured response. Calculated without being vindictive. Vindictiveness is inefficient, Vriya replied, turning back to her computer to draft the necessary communications. I prefer outcomes that solve for multiple variables simultaneously. She worked in focused silence, composing emails that were models of professional restraint while dropping the equivalent of digital grenades into Quantum Ventures' leadership structure. To the company's general counsel, a formal notice of her intent to exercise Clause 27. 3, with all relevant documentation attached. To select board members, expressions of concern about potential irregularities in the Nexicorp negotiations, with subtle hints about information that might interest the Securities Exchange Commission. To her research team, a carefully worded message of gratitude that contained no details of her departure but suggested they preserve all research documentation according to company protocol, a coded warning they would understand. As she prepared to send the final message, a notification appeared on her screen, an incoming email from Elisandre, sent to the entire executive team, effective immediately. All executive access to company systems will require secondary authentication through the new security protocol implemented last week. Please contact IT if you experience any issues. Vriya's mouth tightened. She's moving faster than I anticipated. Will that lock you out? Theo asked. It would, if I hadn't been the one who designed the new security protocol she's referring to. Vriya's fingers flew across the keyboard, executing a complex sequence of commands. I built the authentication system with an administrative override. That only activates when someone attempts to exclude the system architect, me, from access. On her screen, a confirmation message appeared, administrative privileges restored. Security protocol override active. She's going to notice that, Theo observed. Counting on it, Vriya replied, hitting send on her prepared messages. I want her to know exactly what's happening. No sooner had the emails departed than Vriya's phone lit up with an incoming call, Elisandre. She showed the screen to Theo with a raised eyebrow. That was quick. Are you going to answer? Vriya considered for a moment, then accepted the call, activating speaker mode. Elisandre. I thought you'd still be at the gala. What the hell do you think you're doing? Elisandre's voice was tight with controlled fury. Breaking into company systems after your termination is grounds for legal action. My termination doesn't officially take effect until HR processes the paperwork on Monday, Vriya replied calmly. As of right now, I'm still Chief Innovation Officer with full system access. I'm simply exercising my contractual rights under Clause 27. 3. A beat of silence, then, what clause? The liquidation trigger. Page 17 of my executive agreement. The one you dismissed as legal paranoia 3 years ago when I insisted on its inclusion. Another silence, longer this time. Vriya could almost hear Elisandre's mind racing, trying to recall a detail she'd considered inconsequential at the time. Whatever you think you're doing, it won't work, Elisandre finally said, her voice hardening. The Nexicorp deal is happening. The board has already given preliminary approval. Based on what information? Vriya countered. Did you inform them that we're 90 days from insolvency? That you're selling our core technology at a fraction of its market value? That the deal includes generous retention packages for yourself and select executives while gutting the research division that actually created the value? You have no idea what you're talking about, Elisandre hissed, but the slight tremor in her voice betrayed her. I have access to the full term sheet, Elisandre. Including the side agreement guaranteeing you a consulting position with Nexicorp. At twice your current salary after the acquisition closes. The silence that followed was deafening. Who's with you? Elisandre finally asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Security mentioned you brought someone into the building. Vriya glanced at Theo, who gave a slight nod. Theo Maldavar. A sharp intake of breath. You're working with Maldavar? Are you insane? He's our biggest competitor. He's offered me a conversation, Vriya replied evenly. Which is more professional courtesy than you extended when you fired me via whispered conversation at a charity event after 7 years of service. This is corporate espionage, Elisandre sputtered. I'll have both of you, this is me. Protecting my life's work, Vriya cut in, steel entering her voice. And thanks to Clause 27.3, I now have the legal standing to block any asset sale that undervalues our technology, including your sweetheart deal with Nexicorp. The board will never. 3 board members have already responded to my emails, expressing serious concerns about the Nexicorp negotiations. Would you like to know which 3? Hint, they've never been members of your personal fan club. Vriya could almost see Elisandre's perfect features contorting with rage. When she spoke again, her voice had dropped to a venomous whisper. You won't get away with this. By Monday morning, you'll be locked out of every system, and your precious clause will be buried under so much legal maneuvering you'll spend years and every penny you have trying to enforce it. Vriya smiled, though Elisandre couldn't see it. That's why I've already transferred all relevant documentation to the company's general counsel, the board's audit committee, and an independent escrow agent. The liquidation provisions are already active, Elisandre. The only question is how much collateral damage you want to cause trying to fight them. The line went silent for so long Vriya thought Elisandre might have hung up. Finally, a cold, controlled voice emerged. You've made a serious mistake, Vriya. I built this company. I control it. And I will burn it to the ground before I let you dictate terms. The call ended abruptly. Vriya set down her phone with steady hands, meeting Thero's evaluative gaze. She'll try to invalidate the clause, he observed. Claim it was never properly authorized or that the conditions haven't been met. She can try, Vriya agreed, beginning to shut down her workstation. But the general counsel helped me draft that clause personally. He knows it's valid. And now, so does half the board. What about your team? Theo asked as they prepared to leave. The researchers who've been working under you? Vriya paused, a shadow crossing her features. They're my biggest concern. Elisandre will view them as either assets to be harvested or liabilities to be eliminated. Either way, their work is at risk. Unless they had somewhere else to go, Theo suggested. Somewhere their research could continue uninterrupted, with proper resources and protection from corporate politics. Vriya studied him with new interest. Are you proposing a mass recruitment? I'm proposing a rescue operation, he corrected. Maldavar Mechanics has been developing a new quantum research division. We have the infrastructure, the funding, and the independence from shareholder pressures. What we lack is the right team. As they stepped back into the elevator, Vriya felt the weight of decision pressing upon her. Not just for herself, but for dozens of brilliant researchers whose careers and innovations hung in the balance. I'd need guarantees, she said as the elevator descended. About research autonomy, publication rights, patent ownership. Of course, Theo agreed easily. I've never believed in caging innovation. It's why I've structured Maldavar as a benefit corporation rather than a traditional profit-driven entity. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, now empty save for the night security staff. As they crossed the polished floor toward the exit, Vriya felt a strange lightness beginning to replace the leaden weight of betrayal. Not relief, not yet, but the first stirrings of possibility. Outside, the night had deepened, the city's lights creating a constellation of human ambition against the darkness. Thero's vehicle waited, a sleek shadow among the executive cars. We should go, he said quietly. Elisandre will likely dispatch security to escort you from the premises once she recovers from the initial shock. Vriya took one last look at the building that had been her professional home for 7 years, the place where she'd developed breakthrough technologies, where she'd built a team of brilliant minds, where she'd poured her intellect and passion into problems others thought unsolvable. You know she wasn't lying about one thing, she said as they slid into the vehicle. She will fight this with everything she has. Elisandre doesn't lose gracefully. Few people do, Theo replied. Especially those who've never had to face the consequences of their actions before. The vehicle pulled away silently, leaving Quantum Ventures behind. Vriya felt the distance growing like a physical thing, not just space, but time, identity, purpose all shifting beneath her. Where to now? Theo asked, his question carrying weight beyond mere destination. Vriya considered for a moment. My apartment first. I need to prepare for what's coming. Elisandre won't wait until Monday to strike back. True to her prediction, they had barely reached her building when her phone exploded with notifications. Her company email access terminated, security badge deactivated, benefits status changed to pending review. The swift, digital amputation of her professional identity. She's panicking, Theo observed as they rode the elevator to Vriya's 23rd floor apartment. Acting rashly without considering the optics. Elisandre has always valued speed over strategy when she feels threatened, Vriya agreed, unlocking her door with a palm scan. Her apartment reflected her mind, organized, minimalist, every object chosen for function first and aesthetics second. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city's technology district, including, ironically, the gleaming spire of Quantum Ventures' headquarters in the near distance. Vriya moved directly to her home workstation, a custom-built system with processing power that rivaled some corporate servers. I need to secure my position before Elisandre can undermine it. What's your approach? Theo asked, respectfully maintaining distance as she worked. Three-pronged, Vriya replied, fingers flying across her keyboard. First, I'm documenting the company's financial distress from public filings to establish the trigger conditions for Clause 27. Second, I'm compiling evidence of Elisandre's side arrangement with Nexicorp, the one the board doesn't know about. And third, I'm preparing a detailed analysis of our quantum neural network technology's actual market value compared to the fire sale price in the Nexicorp term sheet. Theo watched her work with undisguised admiration. Most people would be falling apart right now. You're building a fortress. Falling apart is a luxury I can't afford, Vriya said without looking up. Not when there's so much at stake beyond my own career. As she worked, her phone buzzed incessantly with messages from colleagues who had somehow already heard about her termination, expressions of shock, support, confusion. She ignored them for now, focusing on the task at hand with laser precision. An hour passed in focused silence before her secure messaging app chimed with a priority alert, a message from Lorelei Xiong, Quantum Ventures General Counsel and the one executive Vriya had always trusted implicitly. Elisandre called emergency board meeting for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Claiming you stole proprietary data and colluded with competitor. Pushing for legal action. Board divided. Treading carefully. I've flagged your clause as valid and binding. Watch your back. Delete this message. Vriya showed the screen to Theo, her expression grim. She's moving faster than I anticipated, she admitted. And she's changing the narrative, making me the villain rather than addressing the actual issues. A predictable move, Theo observed. When cornered, attack the accuser's credibility. She'll try to invalidate Clause 27. 3 by claiming I breached my fiduciary duty, Vriya reasoned, mind racing ahead. If she can convince the board I acted improperly, she can argue the clause shouldn't apply. Which means you need to establish. Your actions were taken to protect the company, not harm it. Vriya nodded slowly, a new strategy forming. I need to reach the board before that meeting. Not all of them, just enough to create reasonable doubt about Elisandre's version of events. She pulled up the board roster, analyzing each member's history, alignment, and potential receptiveness to her perspective. 7 years of navigating corporate politics had taught her which directors valued truth and which simply followed power. These 3, she said finally, highlighting names. Director Kwan has always been skeptical of Elisandre's growth-at-all-costs strategy. Director Okafor comes from a research background, he understands the value of our technology beyond its immediate market application. And Director Rhee served as CEO during a hostile takeover attempt at her previous company. She knows what it's like to have someone try to undervalue your life's work. Vriya crafted personalized messages to each, carefully balancing professional respect with urgent warning. No accusations, no demands, just clear, factual information about the company's financial position, the true value of its technological assets, and the questionable terms of the Nexicorp deal. To Director Kwan, she emphasized the financial implications. The proposed valuation represents approximately 23% of conservative market estimates for our quantum neural network patents alone. To Director Okafor, she focused on the research implications. The Nexicorp deal structure would effectively dismember the research team that created this breakthrough, potentially setting back practical applications by years. To Director Rhee, she appealed to leadership integrity. These negotiations have been conducted without full disclosure to the board of all terms, including separate arrangements for certain executives post-acquisition. To each, she attached only publicly available Information and documentation she had legally accessed as Chief Innovation Officer prior to her termination. No confidential files, no proprietary code, nothing that could support Elisandre's narrative of corporate espionage. As she prepared to send the messages, Theo spoke quietly from where he'd been reviewing documents at her request. You realize that even if you block the Nexacorp deal, Quantum Ventures still faces insolvency in 90 days without additional funding. Vriya paused, fingers hovering above her keyboard. I know. So what's your endgame here? Force Elisandre out? Take control yourself? Or is this purely about preventing what you see as an unjust outcome? It was a fair question, one Vriya had been avoiding in the focused rush of immediate action. What did she actually want to happen? My priority is protecting the technology. And the team that built it, she said slowly. Beyond that, I don't know yet. But I know I can't let Elisandre sell 7 years of groundbreaking work for pennies on the dollar just to secure her own golden parachute. She sent the messages, then leaned back in her chair, suddenly aware of the exhaustion creeping through her body. The adrenaline that had carried her through the initial shock was beginning to ebb, leaving behind the hollow reality of her situation, fired, labeled a corporate traitor, facing potential legal action from the company she had helped build. You should rest, Theo said, his voice gentler than she'd heard it before. Tomorrow will require clear thinking. Vriya nodded, realizing she was still wearing her emerald gala dress, the fabric now creased from hours hunched over computers. You're right. But I doubt sleep will come easily tonight. It rarely does on the eve of battle, Theo observed. But the clearest strategies often form in those quiet hours between consciousness and dreams. As if on cue, Vriya's phone lit up with another notification, an email from an address she didn't recognize. The subject line sent a chill through her, regarding your termination from Quantum Ventures. She opened it cautiously, wary of digital traps. The message was brief, the sender identified only as a concerned shareholder, Ms. Tannifirth. I've been monitoring Quantum Ventures' decline with growing alarm. Elisandre Dorovan's leadership has destroyed significant value, and her current actions suggest desperation rather than strategy. I control 8% of outstanding shares and am prepared to support your invocation of Clause 27. 3 to block the Nexacorp transaction. I believe others would join this position if presented with full information. Contact me securely if you wish to discuss further. Vriya showed the message to Theo, who read it with raised eyebrows. Interesting timing, he noted. Either a genuine ally or an elaborate trap. Or both, Vriya replied, mind already analyzing the possibilities. Either way, it confirms what I suspected, I'm not the only one who sees through Elisandre's facade. As midnight approached, the city lights outside her windows seemed to pulse with renewed energy, as if reflecting the tensions building within the corporate towers that dominated the skyline. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, accusation, perhaps even litigation, but for the first time since Elisandre's smiling betrayal, Vriya felt something beyond anger and shock. She felt purpose. You should go, she told Theo, rising from her workstation. You've already risked association with what Elisandre will undoubtedly label corporate espionage. Theo shook his head. I've never been particularly concerned with others' labels. And I've seen enough tonight to confirm what I suspected for years, your brilliance has been the true engine behind Quantum Ventures' innovations, not Elisandre's celebrated visionary leadership. He moved toward the door but paused before leaving. Whatever you decide to do next, my offer stands. Not just employment, partnership. Your work deserves the right environment to flourish. After he departed, Vriya stood alone in her apartment, the silence enveloping her like a physical presence. On her screens, the evidence of her professional life blinked in organized chaos, the achievements, the betrayals, the potential futures branching out like quantum possibilities. She moved to the window, gazing at the illuminated spire of Quantum Ventures' headquarters piercing the night sky. For 7 years, that building had been the center of her universe, her purpose, her identity. Now it represented something else. Entirely, a battlefield where the next phase of her professional life would be determined. Not by Elisandre's smile as she delivered termination. Not by Nexacorp's opportunistic undervaluation of her work. But by the liquidation clause she'd had the foresight to insist upon when others dismissed her concerns. For the first time that night, Vriya smiled, not the professional mask she wore at corporate functions, but a genuine expression of determination tinged with the first flickers of vindication. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. Dawn broke over Orveston City with the clinical precision of a laser, slicing between skyscrapers to paint Vriya's apartment in shafts of gold. She stood at her window, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that felt like armor, watching the city awaken. She had slept perhaps 3 hours, but her mind was crystalline with purpose, fueled by a clarity that transcended exhaustion. Her phone chimed, the first of what would undoubtedly be many alerts today. A message from Elisandre, board meeting moved up to 7:30 a.m. Claims, urgent fiduciary concerns. 3 directors already called me for background on your contract clause. Good sign. Vriya checked the time, 6:15 a.m. Elisandre was accelerating the timeline, hoping to catch people unprepared. A predictable move from a woman who confused speed with strategy. Her secure messaging app pinged next, Director Ree responding to last night's communication, disturbing information. Will need verification. Available to discuss at 7 a.m.? Opportunity. Vriya immediately confirmed the call, then turned to her kitchen to brew the strongest possible coffee. As the rich aroma filled her apartment, she mentally rehearsed her approach. Director Ree wasn't an ally, not yet, but her experience surviving a hostile takeover made her potentially receptive to Vriya's perspective. At precisely 7 a.m., her secure line rang. Ms. Tannifirth, Director Ree began without preamble, her voice carrying the crisp efficiency of someone who valued time above pleasantries. I've reviewed your materials. Troubling, if accurate. I need to understand your objective here. Vriya appreciated the directness. My objective is to ensure Quantum Ventures technology is properly valued and its future secured. The Nexicorp deal as structured would essentially liquidate our most valuable innovations at roughly 1/5 their market value. And your termination? How does that factor in? It was unexpected but clarifying, Vriya replied carefully. It removed any obligation I might have felt to remain silent about concerns I've harbored for months regarding our financial reporting and strategic direction. A brief silence. You realize Elisandre is claiming you colluded with Thero Maldivar to sabotage the Nexicorp deal for personal gain. I anticipated she would attempt to discredit the messenger rather than address the message, Vriya said. But the financial records speak for themselves. As do the terms of the Nexicorp deal, including provisions that weren't disclosed to the full board. Another pause. Such as? The side agreement guaranteeing Elisandre a 2-year consulting contract with Nexicorp at twice her current compensation, plus accelerated vesting of all her equity. Similar arrangements for 3 other executives, none of whom were involved in developing the technology being acquired. A sharp intake of breath. You can substantiate this? The documentation was in my departmental budget review last quarter, the projected executive compensation adjustments post-acquisition. I believe Elisandre has copies in the legal archives. I see. Director Ree's tone had shifted. Subtly, cooler, more analytical. And what outcome are you seeking from this morning's board meeting? Vriya took a breath. This was the pivotal question, one she'd spent much of the night contemplating. I want 3 things, she said clearly. First, full disclosure to the board of all Nexicorp deal terms, including side arrangements. Second, an independent valuation of our quantum neural network technology before any transaction proceeds. And third, protection for my research team, whose work represents the future of this company regardless of who leads it. Not demanding Elisandre's removal? Director Ree sounded almost surprised. The board can make its own decisions about leadership once it has complete information, Vriya replied diplomatically. My concern is protecting 7 years of innovation and the team that made it possible. A thoughtful silence followed. You're more measured than I might be in your position, Ms. Tannifirth. Vindictiveness clouds judgment. I prefer clarity. Indeed. Another pause. The meeting begins in 20 minutes. I suggest you be available should the board wish to hear directly from you. The call ended. Vriya set down her phone, assessing the exchange. Not a promise of support, but an opening, and perhaps more significantly, a request for her availability during a meeting she'd been explicitly excluded from. She finished her coffee and moved to her workstation, where multiple screens displayed the current state of play. Quantum Ventures stock had opened down 3% on rumors of executive restructuring. Financial analysts were beginning to question the company's cash position, and 3 separate technology blogs had published speculative pieces about her departure, ranging from mostly accurate to wildly conspiratorial. Her personal email had exploded overnight, messages from colleagues, competitors, journalists, even headhunters who somehow already knew she was suddenly available. She ignored them all, focusing instead on the secure document she'd prepared overnight, a comprehensive analysis of Quantum Ventures' intellectual property portfolio with conservative market valuations for each major patent family. The quantum neural network technology alone, her primary contribution, carried a projected value of $1.2 billion based on comparable licensing deals and acquisition premiums in the sector. The Nexicorp term sheet valued the entire company at $780 million. Her secure line rang again at 7:38 a.m. Unknown number. Vriya Tannifirth speaking. Miss Tannifirth, this is Ardel Benur, chairman of the board of Quantum Ventures. His deep voice carried the careful neutrality of someone navigating a minefield. You've created quite a situation. I'd suggest the situation was created when the company's chief innovation officer was terminated via whispered conversation at a charity event, Mr. Chairman. A sigh. The board is currently in emergency session discussing several matters, including your invocation of Clause 27. 3 and allegations regarding the Nexacorp negotiations. We would appreciate your perspective directly. I'm available now, Vriya replied, maintaining the same professional composure that had carried her through countless high-stakes meetings. Excellent. I'm sending a secure conference link. Please join immediately. Seconds later, her screen filled with faces, the 7-member board arranged in a digital grid, expressions ranging from openly hostile, Director Vance, Elisandre's longtime ally, to carefully neutral, Chairman Benur, to openly curious, Director Kwan. Elisandre herself occupied the center square, her perfect features arranged in a mask of injured dignity that might have been convincing to someone who hadn't worked closely with her for 7 years. Miss Tannifirth, Chairman Benur began formally. Thank you for joining us on short notice. We're discussing the events of the past 12 hours and would value your direct input before proceeding further. Of course, Vriya replied, maintaining steady eye contact with the camera. I'm happy to address any questions. Let's start with the most serious allegation, Director Vance cut in immediately. Did you access company systems after being informed of your termination, and did you do so in the presence of Theo Maldivar, the CEO of our primary competitor? Vriya had anticipated this opening salvo. I accessed systems I was still authorized to access in my capacity as Chief Innovation Officer, a position I legally still held at that time since no formal termination paperwork had been processed. My access credentials remained active, and I used them to review my own employment contract and verify the company's financial status as it pertained to Clause 27. 3. With a competitor present, Vance pressed. With Mr. Maldivar present, yes. Though he had no access to any systems and viewed only the text of my employment contract, a document that contains no proprietary technology information. Why would you bring him to our headquarters at all? Elisandre interjected, her voice carrying a perfect note of betrayed trust. For the same reason you brought Darius Fleming to the charity gala, Vriya replied evenly. To discuss potential professional opportunities following the unexpected termination of my employment. A flicker of discomfort crossed Elisandre's features. At the mention of Nexacorp's CEO, Director Okafor, the former research scientist, leaned forward slightly. Miss Tannifirth, can you explain in simple terms what Clause 27. 3 entails and why you believe it's applicable in this situation? Certainly. Vriya pulled up the contract language and shared her screen. Clause 27. 3 states that if I am terminated without cause during a period when the company is in financial distress, defined as having less than 120 days of operational runway at current burn rates, my unvested options convert immediately to preferred shares with specific liquidation preferences. She switched screens to show the company's latest cash flow projections. As of yesterday, Quantum Ventures has approximately 90 days of operational funding remaining, meeting the distress criterion. My termination was explicitly characterized as a strategic restructuring rather than for cause, triggering the conversion provision. The practical effect, she continued, is that I now hold approximately 4% of the company as preferred shares with 3x liquidation preference and veto rights over any transaction involving more than 30% of company assets, which would include the proposed Nexacorp acquisition. Director Kwan, the financial expert, spoke next. And your intent in exercising this clause is what, exactly? To ensure proper valuation of the company's assets before any transaction is completed, Vriya replied without hesitation. Based on my analysis, the current Nexacorp offer significantly undervalues our quantum neural network technology, the primary asset they're seeking to acquire. By how much? Director re-asked. Vriya changed her screen share again, displaying her valuation analysis. Conservative comparable transactions suggest our quantum neural network patents alone are worth approximately $1.2 billion. The Nexacorp offer values the entire company at $780 million. A ripple of reactions crossed the grid of faces. Director Kwan's eyebrows shot up. Chairman Benur frowned thoughtfully. Elisandre's expression hardened into a brittle smile. These are purely theoretical valuations, Elisandre countered dismissively. The reality is that we need this deal to close quickly to address our liquidity concerns. Nexacorp's offer is The only viable option on the table. Is it? Vriya challenged quietly. Has the board been presented with any alternatives? Has the technology been properly marketed to potential strategic partners? Or has this particular deal been fast-tracked for other reasons? What are you implying? Elisandre's voice had acquired a dangerous edge. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking whether the board has been fully informed about all aspects of the Nexacorp transaction, including any arrangements for current executives post-acquisition. The silence that followed was deafening. Chairman Benur cleared his throat. Uncomfortably. Ms. Dorovan, perhaps you could address this specific concern? Elisandre's perfect composure slipped for just a moment, a flicker of calculation crossing her features before her professional mask returned. Any executive arrangements would be standard retention packages, she said smoothly. Nothing unusual for transactions of this nature. Then you wouldn't object to disclosing the full terms to the board, Director Rhee suggested, her tone making it clear this wasn't really a question. Of course not, Elisandre replied with a tight smile. Though I fail to see how this relates to Ms. Tannifirth's breach of fiduciary duty in colluding with a competitor. I haven't colluded with anyone, Vriya corrected firmly. I've exercised a contractual right that was specifically designed for this scenario, when the company's leadership makes decisions that potentially undervalue its assets during financial distress. Director Okafor, who had been silently observing, suddenly spoke. Ms. Tannifirth, if you block the Nexacorp deal using this clause, what happens to the company? We still face the same liquidity crisis. It was the question Vriya had been waiting for, the one that moved beyond accusations to actual solutions. I've prepared a three-part alternative, she said, switching her screen share again to display a new document. First, a bridge financing arrangement to extend our runway by 6 months, secured by our secondary patent portfolio, not the core quantum neural network technology. She clicked to the next slide. Second, a strategic partnership approach rather than outright acquisition, allowing us to maintain control of our core technology while licensing specific applications to multiple partners across different sectors. This approach would generate higher aggregate value than an exclusive sale to a single acquirer. Final slide. Third, operational restructuring to reduce burn rate without sacrificing research capability. I've identified $14.3 million in annual savings that could be implemented immediately without affecting our core innovation engine. The board members studied the proposal in silence. Even Director Vance appeared grudgingly interested. This is all theoretical, Elisandre finally said, but her dismissal lacked conviction. We need certainty, not hypotheticals. Actually, Director Kwan interjected, studying Vriya's numbers closely, these projections appear quite sound. The multi-partner licensing approach in particular could significantly increase our valuation multiples. The question, Chairman Benur said carefully, is whether we have time to pursue alternative strategies given our current cash position. Vriya had anticipated this concern. That's why I've already secured a preliminary term sheet for bridge financing. Elisandre's head snapped up. You what? I reached out to several potential financing sources last night, Vriya explained calmly. One has already expressed serious interest in providing 6 months of operational funding in exchange for warrants convertible at our next financing round. That's completely unauthorized, Elisandre sputtered. You had no authority to. I didn't execute anything, Vriya interrupted. I simply explored options as any responsible executive would when facing a potential undervaluation of company assets. The term sheet has been sent to Lorelei Xiong for proper legal review. Director Rhee's lips curved in what might have been a suppressed smile. May I ask the source of this potential bridge financing? Horizon Quantum Fund, Vriya replied. They specialize in supporting deep tech companies through challenging transitions. Director Kwan nodded appreciatively. A reputable firm. Conservative. But solid. Chairman Benur leaned forward, his expression grave. Ms. Tannifirth, while your alternative proposal deserves consideration, the fact remains that you were terminated from your position. Your continued involvement in company affairs is complicated. I understand, Vriya acknowledged. Which is why I'm not seeking to reverse my termination or return to my previous role. My sole concern is ensuring the technology my team and I developed over 7 years isn't sold for a fraction of its value. A moment of silence followed as the board members exchanged glances. Even through the digital interface, Vriya could sense the shifting dynamics, calculation, reassessment, realignment. I think, Director Okafor said slowly, we need to discuss this matter further as a board. Ms. Tannifirth, would you be willing to step away from the call while we deliberate? Of course, Vriya agreed. I appreciate the opportunity to present my perspective. Before we continue, Director Ree added, I'd like to request that Ms. Dorovan share the complete Nexicorp term sheet with the board, including all executive arrangements. Elisandre's smile didn't waver, but her eyes had gone cold. Certainly. Though I maintain that Ms. Tannifirth's actions constitute a serious breach of her obligations to this company. The screen went blank as Vriya was placed in a digital waiting room. She exhaled slowly, reviewing her performance. She had maintained composure, presented facts rather than accusations, and offered solutions rather than merely blocking the Nexicorp deal. Whether it would be enough remained to be seen. Her phone vibrated with an incoming message, CEO Elisandre, how's it going? She typed a brief response, board meeting in progress. Presented alternative to Nexicorp deal. Waiting for their response. His reply came immediately, whatever the outcome, remember you've already won the most important battle, you refuse to be silenced. The words resonated more deeply than she had expected. Regardless of what the board decided, she had stood her ground. She had defended her work, her team, her principles. Not with anger or vindictiveness, but with strategic clarity and unwavering purpose. The waiting stretched to 30 minutes, then 45. Vriya used the time to review market reactions to the rumors now circulating about quantum ventures, stock down 5%, analysts issuing cautionary notes, competitors circling like sharks scenting blood. Yet beneath the obvious vulture capitalism, she detected something else, genuine concern about the fate of the quantum neural network technology. Her work mattered beyond corporate valuations or executive egos. At the 1-hour mark, her screen reactivated. The board members appeared again, expressions unreadable. Elisandre was conspicuously absent. Chairman Benur cleared his throat. Ms. Tannifirth, thank you for your patience. The board has reached several preliminary decisions that we'd like to share with you. Vriya straightened, maintaining a neutral expression despite the thundering of her heart. First, he continued, we have verified the validity of Clause 27(3) in your contract and confirmed that the conditions for its activation have been met. Your equity conversion will proceed as specified. First victory. Second, after reviewing the complete Nexicorp term sheet, including provisions that were not previously disclosed to the full board, we have decided to pause the acquisition process pending further evaluation. Second victory, and a clear indication that Elisandre's side arrangements had been as problematic as Vriya suspected. Third, we find your alternative proposal sufficiently credible to warrant exploration. The board has authorized preliminary discussions with Horizon Quantum Fund regarding bridge financing to extend our operational runway. Third victory. Finally, Chairman Benur continued, his expression grave, the board has placed CEO Elisandre Dorovan on administrative leave pending a full investigation of the Nexicorp negotiations and related matters. Director Okafor will serve as interim CEO effective immediately. Complete victory. Vriya maintained her composure, though internally a wave of vindication washed through her. I appreciate the board's thoughtful consideration. What would you like from me moving forward? Director Okafor leaned forward. Ms. Tannifirth, your technical expertise remains invaluable to quantum ventures, regardless of recent events. Would you be willing to serve as a special advisor to the board during this transition period, focusing specifically on technology valuation and strategic partnership opportunities? Not a return to her previous role, but something potentially more impactful, direct advisory access to the board without Elisandre's filtering. I would consider it, Vriya replied carefully, provided certain conditions are met. Such as? Chairman Benur asked. Protection for my research team, transparent communication about the company's strategic direction, and a commitment to maintaining the integrity of the quantum neural network technology rather than dismantling it for quick returns. Director Ree nodded approvingly. Reasonable requests. I believe we can accommodate them. There's one other matter, Director Kwan added. The concerned shareholder who contacted you last night. We'd like to understand that connection better. Vriya blinked in surprise. I received an anonymous email from someone claiming to hold 8% of Quantum Ventures stock, expressing support for my position. I didn't respond and don't know their identity. The board members exchanged glances. Interesting, Chairman Benur said. Because we received a similar communication this morning, from CEO Elisandre. Vriya's surprise must have shown on her face. You weren't aware that Elisandre Mechanics has been quietly acquiring Quantum Ventures stock over the past 6 months? Director Kwan asked. They now hold approximately 8.3% of outstanding shares. The pieces clicked into place. Thero's presence at the charity gala. His immediate recognition of her research. His offer of a conversation that came just as her Quantum Ventures career imploded. I was not aware, she replied honestly. though it explains certain convergences of interest. Indeed. Director Okafor's expression was thoughtful. Which raises another question: what are your intentions regarding Maldivar's apparent interest in you and your team? It was the question Vriya had been asking herself since stepping into Thero's vehicle the previous night. The man had offered her a potential lifeline at her lowest professional moment, but was it genuine recognition of her value, or merely opportunistic acquisition of a competitor's talent? I have no formal arrangement with Maldivar Mechanics, she said carefully. Mr. Maldivar expressed interest in my work and offered to discuss possibilities, but nothing has been decided. But you're considering his offer, Director re-observed. I'm considering all options, Vriya corrected. My priority has been protecting the work my team and I have built at Quantum Ventures. If that can be properly valued and developed here, that would be my preference. A silent communication seemed to pass between the board members before Chairman Benur spoke again. Ms. Tannifirth, your loyalty to the technology you've developed is commendable. The board would like to propose a more substantive arrangement than a temporary advisory role. Vriya waited, sensing a significant shift in the conversation. We'd like you to return to Quantum Ventures as Chief Technology Officer, reporting directly to the board during this transition period. You would have primary responsibility for the quantum neural network technology and full authority to protect and develop it as you see fit. It was more than she had expected, not just a return, but an elevation with direct board access that would bypass any future CEO's filtering. That's a generous offer, she acknowledged. May I ask what prompted it? Director Okafor answered. With surprising candor. Frankly, the realization that we nearly lost our most valuable asset, not just the technology, but the mind behind it. Maldivar clearly recognizes your value. It would be foolish for us not to do the same. Vriya considered the proposal carefully. Return to Quantum Ventures with expanded authority and direct board access. The ability to protect her team and technology. Vindication in the face of Elisandre's attempted disposal. Or step away completely. Join Maldivar Mechanics, a company whose ethics and approach to innovation she respected. Start fresh without the baggage of recent events. I appreciate the offer, she said finally. But before I can respond, I need to understand the board's vision for Quantum Ventures' future. Is your goal still to sell the company, just at a better price? Or to build something sustainable that honors the technology's potential? A fair question, Chairman Benur acknowledged. The truth is, we're reassessing our strategy in light of recent events. What's your perspective? My perspective, Vriya said carefully, is that the quantum neural network technology we've developed has applications far beyond immediate commercialization. It represents a fundamental advance that could transform multiple industries over the next decade. Selling it now, to anyone, would be like selling a sapling that could grow into a redwood. Director Okafor nodded slowly. I've had similar thoughts. Perhaps our focus on quarter-to-quarter results has blinded us to the longer horizon. Then let me propose a third option, Vriya said, seizing the moment of receptivity. Neither an outright sale nor business as usual. Instead, a strategic restructuring that preserves our independence while securing the runway we need to fully develop the technology's potential. She outlined her vision: a leaner core company focused on the quantum neural network research, strategic licensing partnerships in specific verticals, and a sustainable burn rate that wouldn't require constant fundraising cycles. As she spoke, she could see the board members' expressions shifting from skepticism to consideration to cautious interest. Even Director Vance, Elisandre's staunchest ally, appeared grudgingly engaged by the financial projections. This would require significant changes to our current structure, Chairman Benur noted when she finished, including difficult decisions about which projects to continue and which to sunset. True transformation is never painless, Vriya acknowledged. But it's less painful than slow decline followed by fire sale. Director Ree leaned forward, her expression decisive. I move that we authorize Ms. Tannifirth to develop this restructuring plan in detail for board consideration, with the understanding that her return as CTO would be contingent on mutual agreement regarding the plan's implementation. Seconded, Director Kwan said immediately. Chairman Benur looked around the virtual room, registering nods of agreement from most board members. Very well. Ms. Tannifirth, can you have a detailed proposal ready within a week? I can, she confirmed, already mentally outlining the key components. Excellent. And regarding the Maldivar situation, I'll maintain appropriate professional boundaries during this process, Vriya assured him. No confidential information will be shared. The meeting concluded with formal confirmations of next steps. Vriya's equity conversion would proceed, Elisandre would remain on leave pending investigation, and Director Okafor would assume interim CEO responsibilities while Vriya developed the restructuring plan. As her screen returned to normal, Vriya sat back in her chair, the enormity of what had just transpired washing over her. In less than 24 hours, she had gone from being fired with a smile to holding the future of the entire company in her hands. Her phone chimed with a message from Theo. Heard interesting news about a board meeting. Available to continue our conversation when you're ready. She smiled slightly at his careful phrasing. He already knew the outcome. His 8.3% ownership would have guaranteed him information, but was allowing her the space to process and decide. She typed her response with deliberate clarity. Thank you for your support yesterday. The situation has evolved in unexpected ways. I'll be focusing on a restructuring plan for Quantum Ventures over the coming week, but would welcome your perspective as a potential strategic partner afterward. His reply came moments later. Understood. My offer remains open in whatever capacity makes most sense. Some technologies transcend conventional corporate boundaries. Yours is one of them. Vriya set down her phone and turned to gaze out at the city skyline, where Quantum Ventures headquarters still stood gleaming in the morning sun. 24 hours ago, she had been summarily dismissed from its corridors. Now she held its future in her hands. Not because she had sought vengeance. Not because she had played corporate politics. But because she had refused to let someone else's smile of dismissal define her value or her work's worth. The liquidation clause she had insisted upon, the one Elisandre had dismissed with a patronizing smile years ago, had become the fulcrum that shifted the entire balance of power. Vriya opened her laptop and began to outline the future she would build, not from the ashes of destruction, but from the solid foundation of innovation that had always been the true value at the core of everything she had created. 1 week after the emergency board meeting, Vriya stood at the window of what was now officially her office, not the familiar northeast corner she'd occupied for years, but the spacious suite on the top floor previously reserved for the CEO. The nameplate on the door read simply, Vriya Tannifirth, Chief Technology Officer, but the location sent a clear message throughout Quantum Ventures. The company's future would be built on innovation, not personality. The city sprawled beneath her, morning sunlight glinting off glass towers and autonomous vehicle convoys snaking through the grid of streets. Somewhere in that urban tapestry, Elisandre Dorovan was probably meeting with her attorneys, planning her next move. Vriya felt no satisfaction in her former CEO's downfall, only a calm certainty that the technology she'd spent 7 years developing was finally receiving the recognition and protection it deserved. Her secure tablet chimed with a reminder, 30 minutes until the all-hands meeting where she would present the restructuring plan the board had unanimously approved yesterday. 7 days of relentless work, sleepless nights, and countless simulations had culminated in a blueprint not just for survival, but for transformation. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Lorelei Xiang entered, impeccably dressed as always, a thin smile playing at her lips. Ready for your debut as the company's savior? The general counsel asked, closing the door behind her. Hardly a savior, Vriya replied. Just someone who refused to let 7 years of work be undervalued. Your modesty is charming but unnecessary, Lorelei said, settling into one of the chairs facing Vriya's desk. You've accomplished in 1 week what most executives couldn't manage in a quarter. The board is still in shock. Positive shock, I hope. Stunned admiration might be more accurate. Lorelei handed over a sealed envelope. Which is why they approved this without a single objection. Vriya opened it, scanning the formal letter inside. Her eyes widened slightly. This is a significant revision to my compensation package. It's what the architect of Quantum Ventures 2.0 deserves, Lorelei replied matter-of-factly. The equity adjustment alone puts you on par with founder-level stakes in most tech companies. The board felt it appropriate given your role in saving the company from what would have been a disastrous acquisition. Vriya set the letter aside, touched but not entirely comfortable with the framing. I didn't do this for compensation. Which is precisely why you deserve it, Lorelei countered. The people who chase rewards rarely earn them. Those who pursue purpose often create value beyond measurement. Before Vriya could respond, her tablet chimed again, a message from Director Okafor, who had transitioned from interim CEO to permanent executive chairman following the board's strategic pivot. Quarterly projections updated with Horizon funding. Runway extended to 18 months. Board unanimously supports your hybrid licensing strategy. Green light on all fronts. Another piece falling into place. The bridge financing from Horizon Quantum Fund had been secured at terms far more favorable than initially projected, largely due to the fund's enthusiasm for Vriya's restructuring plan. Rather than a desperate cash infusion to a floundering company, it had evolved into a strategic investment in a reimagined entity with clearer purpose and direction. Any word from our friends at Nexicorp? Vriya asked, returning her attention to Lorelei. The general counsel's smile turned slightly predatory. Darius Fleming has been unusually quiet since our formal withdrawal from acquisition talks. Though I hear through industry channels that his board is asking uncomfortable questions about the due diligence process that led them to undervalue our neural network patents by nearly $500 million. And Elisandre? Still maintaining. She did nothing improper, despite the evidence in her own emails. Her attorneys have proposed a separation agreement that would require full mutual releases and non-disparagement clauses in exchange for her forfeiting claims to certain equity accelerations. Vriya considered this. Does the board support that approach? They've delegated that decision to you, actually, Lorelei replied. Given that you were the primary target of her, let's call it strategic restructuring. The irony wasn't lost on Vriya. 1 week ago, Elisandre had fired her with a smile and a patronizing platitude about liberation. Now, Vriya held the power to determine the terms of Elisandre's departure. Let her keep the equity she's rightfully earned, Vriya decided after a moment's reflection. No acceleration, no bonus, but no punitive clawbacks either. Clean separation with standard non-disparagement. Lorelei studied her with undisguised curiosity. That's remarkably generous given the circumstances. It's not generosity, Vriya clarified. It's pragmatism. Prolonged legal battles would only distract from what matters, building something valuable from what remains. Elisandre's equity is worthless today anyway. If we succeed in our restructuring, at least she'll have something to show for her years as founder, regardless of how things ended. Very philosophical, Lorelei observed, though her tone suggested she might have chosen a different approach. Speaking of building value, have you decided how to respond to Theo Maldivar's partnership proposal? The question touched on the one aspect of Vriya's restructuring plan that remained unresolved. Throughout the past week, Theo had maintained a respectful distance, sending only one brief message reiterating his interest in exploring collaborative opportunities once she had stabilized Quantum Ventures' situation. His approach had been patient, strategic, qualities Vriya had come to appreciate even more after Elisandre's impulsive destructiveness. I'm meeting with him tomorrow, Vriya confirmed. Not as a potential employer, but as a potential strategic partner. His quantum encryption architecture could complement our neural network in ways that would benefit both companies. And the fact that Maldivar Mechanics now owns 8.3% of our stock makes him an aligned investor in our success, Vriya replied simply. The board has already approved preliminary partnership discussions, provided all appropriate firewalls are maintained. Lorelei nodded, satisfied with the response. Well, I should let you prepare for your address. The auditorium is already filling up. Standing room only, from what I hear. After the general counsel departed, Vriya took a few minutes to review her presentation one final time. The restructuring plan was comprehensive but focused on 3 core principles. First, a strategic pivot from consumer applications to specialized enterprise solutions in 5 key verticals where quantum neural networks offered transformative potential: pharmaceutical discovery, climate modeling, financial risk analysis, materials science, and cryptographic security. Second, a hybrid business model combining proprietary technology development with selective licensing partnerships that would generate immediate revenue while preserving long-term optionality. Third, a streamlined operational structure that reduced administrative overhead while protecting the core research and engineering teams essential to continued innovation. The plan wasn't without pain. 3 consumer-focused product lines would be discontinued, and approximately 15% of positions would be eliminated, primarily in marketing, sales, and general administration. But unlike the arbitrary cuts Elisandre had planned, each decision was strategically aligned with the company's refocused mission. Most importantly, the quantum neural network research team would remain intact, with expanded resources and clearer purpose. The people who had built the technology that would save Quantum Ventures would be the ones to guide its future evolution. Vriya gathered her materials and headed toward the central auditorium, where over 600 employees waited to learn the company's fate. As she walked the corridors, faces turned in her direction, some curious, some hopeful, some still wary after the turbulence of recent days. She acknowledged each with a small nod, projecting the quiet confidence that had become her signature. At the entrance to the auditorium, she paused, taking a moment to center herself. Through the doors, she could hear the low buzz of hundreds of conversations, people speculating, worrying, hoping. In 7 years at Quantum Ventures, she had never addressed the full company. That had always been Elisandre's role, her stage, her spotlight. Today, Vriya would step into that light not because she craved it, but because the moment demanded clarity and truth rather than performance. She pushed through the doors and walked purposefully to the stage. The room quieted immediately, all eyes tracking her progress. On the large screens flanking the stage, the Quantum Ventures logo had been subtly redesigned, the same hummingbird symbol, but with a more defined neural network pattern in its wings, signifying the company's refined focus. Vriya took her position. At the center of the stage, the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders, not as a burden now, but as a mantle she had chosen to accept. "Good morning," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the perfect acoustics. 1 week ago, Quantum Ventures stood at a crossroads. Today, we begin a new journey, not as the company we were, but as the company we were always meant to become. For the next 30 minutes, she laid out the restructuring plan in precise detail, the strategic rationale, the operational changes, the timeline for implementation. No corporate euphemisms, no artificial enthusiasm, just clear communication about what would change and why. When she reached the most difficult part, the necessary reduction in workforce, she didn't sugarcoat it or hide behind vague terminology. These decisions were made based on strategic alignment, not individual performance, she explained. Everyone affected will receive generous severance, extended benefits, and dedicated placement support. These are painful but necessary steps to ensure the company's long-term viability and the continued development of the technology we've all worked so hard to create. As she concluded the formal presentation, Vriya took a moment to survey the room. Hundreds of faces looked back at her, some relieved, some concerned, all attentive. Unlike Elisandre's typical corporate rallies, there was no forced applause, no manufactured enthusiasm. Just the shared recognition of a pivotal moment in the company's evolution. "I'll now take your questions," she said, stepping away from the podium to create a more direct connection with the audience. "And I promise you honest answers, even when they're difficult." For nearly an hour, she fielded questions from employees at all levels, from senior directors worried about reporting structures to junior engineers concerned about project continuity. She answered each with the same thoughtful directness, never deflecting or resorting to corporate platitudes. When a young researcher from the quantum team raised her hand, Vriya nodded encouragingly. "A week ago, you were fired," the researcher said bluntly. "Now you're restructuring the entire company. What changed, and how can we trust this direction will hold when the next crisis comes?" It was the question that had been hovering unspoken throughout the room, the elephant no one had directly addressed. Vriya appreciated the courage it took to ask it. What changed was the recognition that our most valuable asset isn't our brand, our funding, or even our technology in isolation, she replied. It's the collective intelligence and purpose of the people who create that technology. What changed was the board's understanding that selling that asset at a discount would destroy more value than it created. She paused, then continued with careful honesty. "As for trust, I can't promise there won't be future challenges or changes in direction. What I can promise is that as long as I'm in this role, decisions will be made based on what serves the technology's potential and the people who create it, not what serves any individual's agenda." The researcher nodded, seemingly satisfied with the response. As the session concluded, Director Okafor joined Vriya on stage, his presence a visible signal of the board's unified support for the new direction. "Thank you all for your attention and thoughtful questions," he addressed the room. "As executive chairman, I want to emphasize that the board unanimously supports this restructuring plan and has complete confidence in Vriya's leadership. We believe Quantum Ventures' best days are ahead, and we're committed to providing the stability and resources needed to realize the full potential of our groundbreaking technology." When the all-hands meeting finally ended, Vriya found herself surrounded by department heads and team leaders, all eager to discuss next steps and implementation details. The energy had shifted from anxiety to focused determination, not blind optimism, but the purposeful engagement of people who understood both the challenges and opportunities ahead. By late afternoon, she finally returned to her office, mentally exhausted but centered in a way she hadn't felt in months. The restructuring announcement had been picked up by major tech publications, with headlines ranging from "Quantum Ventures pivots after failed acquisition" to "Rising CTO saves company" with obscure contract clause. None captured the full truth, but truth rarely fit neatly into headlines. Her secure line rang, Theo Maldivar calling directly rather than through assistants or schedulers. "Impressive performance today," he said when she answered. "The market seems to agree. Your stock is up 7% since the announcement. You've been watching, I see." "With great interest," he acknowledged. "Though I'm more interested in tomorrow's conversation about potential collaboration than in today's stock movement." "As am I," Vriya replied. "I've reviewed your encryption architecture in detail. There are natural integration points with our neural network approach that could yield significant advances. My thoughts exactly. Our team's approaching the same quantum frontier from different angles, your neural pathways, our encryption matrices. Together, they could create something neither company could build alone. It was the kind of strategic thinking Elisandre had never prioritized, the patient building of complementary capabilities rather than flashy acquisitions or product launches. I look forward to exploring the possibilities, Vriya said. Though, I should warn you that my primary commitment remains to Quantum Ventures' independent success. I would expect nothing less, Theo replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. The most valuable partnerships are between equals who maintain their distinct strengths. After they disconnected, Vriya turned her attention to the dozens of messages that had accumulated during the all-hands meeting, board members offering congratulations, team leaders requesting implementation guidance, industry analysts seeking comments on the restructuring announcement. Among them was a message from an unexpected source, the anonymous, concerned shareholder who had contacted her the night of her termination, before she knew Theo was behind the 8.3% stake. The message was brief: liquidation clauses are powerful tools when wielded by those who understand their purpose. You've demonstrated that understanding beautifully. Your true victory isn't in blocking one bad deal, but in creating space for something better to emerge. The market will reward this wisdom in time. No signature, no identifying information. But unlike the previous message, this one hadn't come from any address associated with Maldivar Mechanics. Curious, Vriya ran a trace on the message routing. The results showed it had originated from a secure server registered to Horizon Quantum Fund, their new bridge financing partner. Another player had been watching the chess match all along, it seemed. One with the resources to provide crucial support at precisely the right moment. She filed the information away for future consideration. In the complex ecosystem of quantum technology investment, having multiple aligned stakeholders was ultimately beneficial, provided their interests remained compatible with Quantum Ventures' core mission. As evening fell over the city, most employees had departed, but lights still burned in scattered offices throughout the building, teams already implementing the first phases of the restructuring plan, researchers liberated to pursue the most promising avenues of their work without arbitrary commercial deadlines. Vriya made a point of walking the research floors before leaving, stopping to check in with the teams still working. Not to monitor or manage, but to connect, to ensure they understood their place in the reimagined company was not just secure, but central. In the Quantum Neural Network lab, she found Aisha Khoury, the young researcher who had asked the pointed question during the all-hands meeting. Still here? Vriya asked, pausing at the doorway. Aisha looked up from her workstation, where complex simulations created fractal patterns of light and data. Couldn't stop thinking about a new approach to the coherence problem. With the restructuring, I realized we can finally prioritize fundamental architecture questions over commercial application timelines. Vriya smiled, recognizing the pure intellectual excitement that drove the best researchers. That's exactly the point. The commercial applications will come, but only if we solve the foundational challenges first. Is it really going to work? Aisha asked, her expression suddenly serious. The whole restructuring, I mean. We've all been through so many strategy shifts and executive promises. It's going to work, Vriya replied with quiet certainty, because unlike previous shifts, this one aligns with the technology's actual potential rather than trying to force it into a predefined commercial box. And because the people who understand that technology best, people like you, are now empowered to follow its natural evolution. Aisha studied her thoughtfully. You could have left, you know. After what happened at the gala. Taken your expertise elsewhere. Started over with a clean slate. I considered it, Vriya acknowledged. But this technology, this team, it's not just a job. It's 7 years of building something that could fundamentally change how computational intelligence works. I couldn't walk away from that potential. Just because one person failed to value it properly. So you triggered the liquidation clause instead. I exercised a contractual right that existed precisely for this scenario, Vriya corrected gently. The goal wasn't liquidation, it was protection. Aisha nodded slowly. Protection that created space for transformation. Exactly. As Vriya finally left the building that evening, the city lights created a tapestry of possibility against the darkening sky. 1 week ago, she had stood in this same spot, freshly fired and facing professional devastation. Tonight, she departed as the architect of Quantum Ventures' most significant strategic pivot, not because she had sought power, but because she had refused to abandon purpose. Her phone chimed with a final message for the day, Director Ri. Sharing the board's formal press release announcing the restructuring plan and Vriya's elevation to the executive leadership team. The stock had closed up 9 2%, the strongest single-day gain in the company's history. Numbers couldn't capture the true value of what had been preserved, not just jobs or technology, but possibility. The quantum neural network research that had been days away from being stripped for parts by Nexicorp would now continue evolving under the guidance of the very minds that had created it. As Vriya slid into her vehicle for the drive home, she reflected on the liquidation clause that had changed everything, 17 lines of legal text she had insisted upon 3 years earlier, when everyone else dismissed it as unnecessary caution. Elisandre had signed it with a patronizing smile, calling it adorable that you think you need protection. That clause, dormant but powerful, had become the fulcrum that shifted the entire balance of power when activated at precisely the right moment. Not a weapon of destruction, but a tool of transformation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: the partnership discussion with Thero, the implementation of restructuring measures, the ongoing navigation of market expectations. But tonight, Vriya allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She had been fired with a smile by someone who thought her expendable. She had triggered a liquidation clause that others had dismissed as meaningless. And in doing so, she had created the space for something stronger to emerge from what might have been destruction. Not through vengeance or vindictiveness, but through strategic clarity and unwavering purpose.